The crosshairs settle on a silhouette, a silent geometry of death waiting for the mechanical click of a heavy tactical device. When the leaden projectile flies, the Secret Service has exactly 0 seconds to rewrite the inevitable script of a national tragedy. This is the OODA Loop in its most brutal form, where the binary chains of observation and action are suddenly severed. If the gears of protection grind to a halt for even a millisecond, the stability of a global superpower collapses into chaos. We are entering the dark heart of the zero-fail mission, an elite world where human shields face the unthinkable every day. From the blood-stained asphalt of Dallas to the high-tech shadows of the modern era, the agency evolves through its own failures. The Secret Service is not just a group of bodyguards, but a complex machine designed to anticipate the moves of a jackal. Behind the dark suits and silent earpieces lies a sophisticated web of counter-snipers, intelligence analysts, and tactical units ready for war. Every movement is a calculated dance, every glance a scan for anomalies in a world that wants to strike the center. But even the most perfect machines have flaws, hidden deep within the exhaustion of the agents and the politics of power. To understand the future of protection, we must first dissect the moments where the shield cracked and the nightmare became real. It began on a humid morning in Texas, where a lean agency faced a charismatic leader who loved the crowd too much. The agents were weary, their senses dulled by the late-night neon of shady clubs and the relentless pace of a traveling king. In 1963, the thin line between safety and catastrophe was manned by only 36 agents, a skeletal force for a global icon. They ignored the red flags, the unvetted routes, and the published schedules that invited a predator to take a calculated lethal aim. When the first kinetic energy discharged, the lack of evasive training turned a limousine into a slow-moving target for an unseen assassin. Clint Hill's desperate sprint was a testament to courage, but the mechanical reality of physics had already dictated a very different outcome. Since that day, the agency has transformed from a municipal-sized force into a multi-billion-dollar fortress of technology and human sacrifice. They now employ magnetometers, facial recognition, and hardened vehicles like the Beast to create an impenetrable bubble around the most powerful person. Yet, as the threats evolve from bolt-action rifles to 3D-printed devices and chemical agents, the margin for error remains absolutely zero. This is the anatomy of the Secret Service, a documentary look at the men and women who stand between order and total oblivion. Every month, counter-snipers must prove they can neutralize a threat from 1,000 yards away, or they lose their badge. The Beast is a 20,000-pound fortress on wheels, sealed against chemical attacks and carrying the president's own aesthetic fluid. Behind the scenes, the emergency response team uses highly specialized canines to sniff out explosives long before the motorcade even arrives. Since the Reagan era, every failed attempt and near miss has been meticulously studied to advance the agency's protective protocols. The agency monitors thousands of threats daily, classifying them by intent and ability to ensure the jackals never get close. In the end, the Secret Service operates in the shadows of history, ensuring that the world's most dangerous job remains business as usual. Before the president arrives, the advance team drafts a comprehensive security plan known internally as the agency's operational Bible. Every inch of the venue is measured, identifying potential sniper nests and calculating the exact trajectory of a kinetic projectile. Agents must secure the invisible, inspecting air filtration systems to ensure that no airborne toxins can reach the protected person. Modern protection utilizes three-dimensional mapping to simulate every possible angle of attack, creating a digital twin of the environment. Specialized K9 units utilize vapor-wake technology, detecting the microscopic scent trail of explosives left behind by moving targets. The mag line is the final filter, a high-pressure bottleneck where every guest is stripped of their anonymity and potential weapons. Even if the tires are shredded, the Beast can flee at high speeds on reinforced steel rims, ensuring a constant escape. Inside the mobile fortress, a supply of the president's specific blood type is always ready for an immediate life-saving transfusion. The counter-assault team carries overwhelming firepower, designed to suppress an attack with a wall of lead within seconds. Counter-snipers must account for wind speed, humidity, and even the curvature of the earth to make a 1,000-yard shot. Plainclothes agents blend into the environment, looking for the tells of a jackal, sweating, nervous tics, or inappropriate clothing. To prevent remote detonation, intelligence agents can jam all local communications, creating a silent zone around the moving motorcade. Facial recognition technology cross-references every person in the crowd against a database of known threats and high-risk individuals. The emergency response team provides the outer layer of defense, armed with high-capacity weapons to repel any perimeter breach. Coordination with local law enforcement is vital, turning thousands of city officers into the eyes and ears of the service. The Hammer team is trained for the worst, providing immediate trauma care for chemical, biological, or kinetic energy impacts. In a crisis, the golden hour is reduced to the golden minute, where every second determines the survival of the president. Constant reassessment is the engine of evolution. Every near miss is dissected to ensure that history never repeats its tragedies. The technical methodology is fueled by the physical toll of the agents, who endure grueling shifts and constant travel. Agents must engage in constant mental simulation, playing out what-if scenarios to ensure their responses are instinctive and automatic. As the Jackal's tools evolve into 3D-printed non-metallic weapons, the service's detection methods must leap into the future. Every vehicle in the motorcade is tested against extreme conditions, from high-speed chases to the impact of explosive shockwaves. Global positioning and satellite uplinks ensure that the Joint Ops Center has eyes on the president anywhere on the planet. Muscle memory is the final layer of the technical methodology. When the plan fails, the agent's instinct must take over. The technical methodology culminates in the safe house protocols, where the president is vanished into a fortress of concrete and steel. This is the invisible architecture of protection, a silent war of technology and preparation that never truly ends. But as the methodology grows more complex, the human element remains the most vulnerable link in the chain of command. Kennedy's appetite for public engagement transformed the presidency into a non-stop global tour, pushing his protectors to their absolute breaking point. From the neon lights of Miami to the rainy runways of D.C., the pace of travel became a relentless, soul-crushing cycle. The agents operated in a blur of double shifts, their mental acuity dulled by the sheer frequency of high-stakes movements. Unlike his predecessors, JFK preferred the vulnerability of the open world over the fortified safety of the historic White House walls. This era introduced a dangerous precedent where the president's charisma dictated the security posture, often overriding the agency's tactical concerns. In the shadows of Fort Worth, the fatigue finally manifested as a group of agents sought refuge in a notorious nightclub. The cellar was a place of lawless energy, where off-duty protectors mingled with the very elements they were trained to avoid. While the clock ticked toward a historic tragedy, the thin line of protection was being eroded by exhaustion and illegal spirits. This structural weakness was compounded by the agency's tiny size, functioning more like a local police squad than a global force. With only 36 agents assigned to the White House, the margin for error was non-existent on that cool November morning. The philosophy of the citizen president meant rejecting the optics of a royal guard, leaving the leader exposed and accessible. As the motorcade moved through Dallas, the lack of advanced building inspections turned the urban canyon into a gallery of unchecked threats. The driver, untrained in high-speed evasive maneuvers, reacted with confusion as the first kinetic discharge echoed through the city. These 6 seconds of chaos would forever change the DNA of the Secret Service, forcing a transition from bodyguards to analysts. The aftermath of Dallas wasn't just a failure of reflexes, it was the collapse of a system that prioritized optics over survival. From this trauma, a new, more rigorous era of recruitment and operational protocols would eventually emerge to protect the American democracy. The agency's expansion in the 1970s was a direct response to the realization that the world had become infinitely more dangerous. No longer would the service be a small cadre of bodyguards. It was evolving into a massive intelligence-driven apparatus. Recruitment became more rigorous, seeking out individuals who could process complex patterns under the most extreme psychological pressure. Protecting a president isn't just about reflexes. It's about training agents to solve complex problems faster than a jackal can create them. Years later, the Hinckley attempt would prove that even with increased numbers, the agency was still vulnerable to the determined loner. The seconds following the Reagan shooting counted more than the event itself, highlighting the vital need for immediate medical intervention. The Secret Service now classifies threats with meticulous detail, monitoring those with the intent and the ability to cause catastrophic harm. In hindsight, the failure to relay Hinckley's prior weapons arrest was a major red flag that deprived protectors of vital intelligence. Every letter and threat is analyzed for DNA, fingerprints, and ink samples, building a global library of potential presidential adversaries. The agency receives an average of 10 threats per day, a constant barrage that requires a perfect system of triage and response. As we move into the modern era, the line between safety and catastrophe remains as thin as a single, well-placed kinetic projectile. The agency classifies every would-be assassin as a jackal, a predator lurking just outside the perimeter of absolute safety. A Class 1 threat might start as a simple drunken boast, but it earns you a very serious personal chat. Class 3 threats represent those with military expertise and a documented history of mental instability or targeted political rage. Inside the forensic labs, the International Ink Library allows specialists to trace the chemical origin of every single threatening letter. Profilers study these paranoid loners to understand the desperate motivations of those seeking notoriety through acts of ultimate violence. The chaos of September 11th revealed deep holes in the coverage, forcing a total rewrite of the agency's playbook. The Airspace Security Branch now monitors the skies, prepared to down rogue drones before they can reach the target. In 2003, the service was drafted into Homeland Security, transforming the protection mission into a form of counterterrorism. The Hammer team prepares for the unthinkable, including nerve agents like Novichok that can neutralize a target in minutes. Internally, the machinery began to rust as scandals involving misconduct and low morale undermined the agency's prestigious reputation. With agents working thousands of hours of unpaid overtime, the zero-fail mission is pushed to its breaking point. The 2024 attempt in Butler proved that even with modern technology, a clear line of sight remains the ultimate threat. Following major security failures, leadership stepped down, leaving the agency to grapple with its most profound identity crisis. Just months later, a second attempt rattled the nation, proving that the jackals are more persistent than ever before. The nightmare scenario is the enemy within, a sleeper agent who has successfully bypassed years of rigorous vetting. Few are willing to take a kinetic projectile for the starting pay, leading to a dangerous drain of talent. Agents must distinguish between a star-struck citizen and a lethal threat in a fraction of a heartbeat. This is the invisible architecture of the modern era, where the battle for safety is fought in the electromagnetic spectrum. The Secret Service operates on a different timeline, where 6 seconds of failure can erase decades of successful protection. The greatest successes of the agency are the stories that are never told, the tragedies that were quietly averted. Maybe the real secret is all the times history almost changed, but the thin line held firm against the dark. Keeping the world stable requires a level of vigilance that most people will never see or even understand. They are the anonymous wall between democracy and chaos, a collective of shadows dedicated to a single impossible goal. In the end, it is not the technology that saves the day, but the unwavering resolve of the human spirit. The Secret Service is a ghost story told in the halls of power, a silent promise kept at any cost. This is how the Secret Service actually works, in the dark, under pressure, and always without fail. Because when the world sleeps, the jackals are hunting, and the protectors are the only thing standing in their way. The independent review panel labeled the Butler security gaps as a fundamental mission failure, exposing a culture of systemic complacency. Gaps in the tactical chain of command created a lethal dead zone, where critical intelligence failed to reach the protective detail. By mid-year, many elite agents hit their federally mandated salary ceilings, essentially working for free during high-stakes presidential campaigns. The agency faces a retention crisis as seasoned veterans seek better conditions, leaving a void of experience in the detail. To compensate for human fatigue, the service is integrating autonomous sentinels to provide a constant, unblinking layer of aerial security. The greatest successes of the Secret Service remain invisible, defined by the catastrophic events that were stopped before they began. Protective intelligence now leverages predictive algorithms to identify potential threats long before a weapon is even drawn in public. Every star on this wall represents a sacrifice made in the line of duty, a silent testament to the cost of protection. The mission of Zero Fail is a heavy burden, requiring a level of perfection that leaves no room for human error. Structural reforms aim to decouple political influence from security decisions, ensuring the agency's autonomy in times of national crisis. Next-generation armor utilizes non-Newtonian fluids that harden instantly upon impact, providing maximum protection with minimal physical weight. Advanced K-9 units are now trained to detect the thermal plumes left behind by moving targets carrying concealed explosive devices. The battleground has shifted to the digital realm, where agents must identify and neutralize sophisticated AI-generated disinformation campaigns. In the event of a total systemic collapse, the Secret Service maintains the continuity of government from hardened, undisclosed locations. Encrypted satellite uplinks ensure that the protective detail remains connected to the global intelligence net, even in remote environments. Restoring public trust requires a new generation of agents who embody the core values of integrity and selfless service. The agency must balance the need for absolute security with the fundamental democratic requirement for an accessible, visible leader. Constant mental simulation allows agents to react instinctively to the unexpected, turning chaos into a choreographed defensive response. New deterrent technologies allow agents to incapacitate threats from a distance without resorting to the use of lethal force. The Secret Service operates in a world of constant movement, where the environment is always changing but the mission remains fixed. Worthy of trust and confidence is not just a motto, it is a sacred oath that every agent carries into the shadows. The judgment of history will be based on the lives saved and the stability maintained by those who chose to stand in the gap. As long as there are those who seek to disrupt the order of the world, there will be those who stand ready to prevent it. The cycle of protection continues, a never-ending dance of preparation, instinct, and the silent promise of zero fail. From the halls of power to the most remote corners of the globe, the Secret Service remains the invisible shield of democracy. Their names may be forgotten, but their legacy lives on in every peaceful transition of power, and every day the world remains stable. This is how the Secret Service actually works, in the shadows, under pressure, and with a commitment that transcends the individual. Because when the world sleeps, the Guardians are watching, ensuring that the nightmare of Dallas never happens again. The story of the Secret Service is a ghost story told in the halls of power where the ending is always the same. A new day begins, and with it, the silent, invisible architecture of protection stands ready for whatever comes next.